Welcome to the Focal Insights Podcast Founder Hour edition, hosted by Joe Pollock. Joe has been in the e-commerce industry for over 25 years. Founder Hour episodes go behind the scenes to learn how some of the best e-commerce brands were founded, grown, and operated straight from the founders themselves. Founder Hour is brought to you by Focal Software, a new generation ERP and operation suite for e-commerce brands and third-party marketplace sellers. Now let's welcome our host, Joe Pollock.
Hello and welcome to the Focal E-commerce Insights podcast, where we chat with e-commerce entrepreneurs about business, selling online, and how to overcome challenges for success. Joining us today is Robert Fordham. Robert has multiple businesses that he owns or helps operate, including Fordham Brothers Farm, Impromech, White Canopy, and Mule Barn. In 2014, Robert started Impromech in a storage building and has grown the business to include 6 employees. And it also had an Amazon component that Robert started from scratch and grew it all the way up to around $40,000 per month in 1.5 years, which is impressive. Robert is a farm boy at heart, mechanic by trade, eternally curious, and a continual learner. So Robert, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here.
The first thing we do is get your stories. Everyone in business, e-commerce business, they always want to hear how you got started. What was the motivation? Was it a hobby? Was it a necessity? How did you get from where you were in 2014 to where you are now?
I've always wanted to work for myself. We grew up farming, and me and my brother farmed for a number of years on the side and both worked full-time jobs. We took a swing at it full-time. The year we did was one of the worst, and I had to get another job. I've always liked working for myself because I like looking into new stuff. I like learning new things, and a lot of times, depending on the employer, sometimes that's kind of hard to find an employer that will allow you to vary outside of the norm very often. And I was lucky for 19 years to be able to work for a local school system. And I run a school bus shop because I've been a mechanic by trade. Been working since I was 7. Losing out in farming pushed me into the school bus realm, worked on cars, trucks, tractors, heavy equipment. I was lucky to have a great school system open to new ideas and a lot of things that I was always interested in. And so how does this tie back to Impromech? Well, this was actually the start of Impromech because the school system, small local school system, they were always struggling trying to keep people to work on the buses and stuff. And so they allowed me a lot of freedom and things to do. So what happened was over the years, we would find things that were going on school buses that we were having a hard time finding the right part. The manufacturer's part, they had tried to upgrade the different parts and always had issues and problems. And me being a farm boy at heart, growing up, I was used to building stuff, welding. I have a fabrication background, welding background,
Tinkering.
Yes, I've always tinkered on all kind of things. I'm a jack of all trades and master of none. Some friends in the manufacturing field that some of them actually went into business and was in manufacturing and had their own small businesses and all. And they were seeing some of the stuff that I was doing. And so I would get them and say, hey, I'll draw this design up. Can you manufacture 10, 15, 20 of these for this local school system? I'll design it, you manufacture, and we'll put them on. They were doing that for me. I was constantly finding little things and trying to figure out ways to do it better. The school system was great to work for, allowing me to do this. Well, one of the guys that I was having build, we were using a a coolant tank for one of the school buses that we were having a lot of issues with. So I drew up a design and got them to manufacture. They were manufacturing for me as I needed. One day back in 2012, 2014, somewhere in that neighborhood, a entrepreneurial, I forget exactly what they were called, but it was basically Georgia Tech would have entrepreneurial resources, and they would go out and look at small businesses grow and help them do different things. Well, one day, one of the guys for Georgia Tech was down with my friend at the manufacturing company, helping him on something else. And he just saw the tank sitting there. He said, well, tell me the story behind this. And he told the story to him. He says, you got time? I want to go meet this guy. He brought him out to meet me. We had a 2.5 hour conversation. He said, I'm going to see you in 6 months. I expect you to have a business license, A, B, C, and D. And he laid a roadmap out for me. Once you do that, I'm going to come back and help you. I didn't need much of a push, but my ideas did. He helped me get started. That's where Impromech began, from improving mechanical design. And so I'd learned early different businesses. I didn't want to tie my name to a business. I wanted something that could grow to a point and then turn off and sell it. So I wanted to come up with a name that was kind of catchy, something that meant something to me. So that's where Impromech comes from, and is improving mechanical design. And that's kind of the tagline for the business. And so it kind of grew and morphed from there. We were actually manufacturing metal coolant tanks to start with, and I was trying to find distributors. I'd always get the same response. We only have 1 or 2 products. We don't want to pick up a small company. If you'll grow, have a bigger product line. I started trying to develop more products. Amazon, eBay might be a great place to sell online.
Hold up a second, Robert. You said a couple things that are cool. The idea for the business was a necessity. You needed it because you were working on buses that needed a solution. So you started to create it. Was part of that seeing that because we're talking about the yellow school buses.
Right, correct.
And they're almost all identical.
There's 3 major manufacturers, so only a few different models, and they're all pretty close.
A million?
I'm sure.
So if one school bus has this particular problem, then there may be a million buses that have this problem, and people that manage those buses also have that problem. So was that a big part of it too? Did that take off where people start seeing there's a solution for these maintenance problems that are a nuisance to us?
Right. I never thought about it that anybody would buy anything that I come up with. So I didn't really think that would be the way it would work until I started meeting people, and they have the same problems and they have the same issues going on. And so that was kind of after that, we started trying to I would go around and talk to school bus shops and try to sell my products, but also find out what issues they had. I found out that everybody's got a ton of issues, but if you'll dig around long enough and deep enough, you'll find commonalities. The hard thing is trying to find an issue you can help enough people fix to make it profitable. And, that was a little bit of the hard thing, because you would get 50 different projects that people wanted you to work on. In the beginning, we worked on a bunch of different things, and they ended up helping solve problems for individuals, which was great, but it did not make hardly any kind of money. So, that was always, because it was a lot of labor, a lot of learning going on in the beginning. I think a lot of business owners think you have a great idea, snap your fingers, and it works out. You learn more from mistakes and failures, from the high points and the things you did perfectly, because they're going to be farther between, especially in the beginning.
When you were working with a manufacturer, it's not, you send them a design, it has to meet your specifications and then be put into use, function, tested, and then proven. And that all takes time, and it doesn't always go exactly how you want it from the start.
We found R&D is an extreme amount of money, and you have to be careful on what you try, because you have to have enough money to cover those costs in the beginning. What was the old saying? You either have to find friends, family, or fools to back you. I used a job to back me, and that's what limited my possibilities, what I could afford with the extra income. Luckily, I had a school system that would buy them from me. We had a malfunction with one, so I'd end up getting it fixed. I wouldn't lose a ton of money. We wouldn't sell it for a profit, but because we were just trying to get it. In the beginning, we were just trying to help the school system. They seen the need for it. They saw, and so it worked out. Hardly any money made. The school got a better deal. I wasn't strapped with all the R&D costs. The hard part of going to market is coming up with a great idea, vetting the idea, and then making sure it's going to work, designing it, going through enough tests. Because I can tell you something, I didn't think about this in the beginning, but when you say school bus, everybody flips out. You're trying to get engineers to sign off on drawings.
Because they're moving children.
My brother's a lawyer, so I've always had kind of a background of knowing a little bit about law and knowing where risk is taking and where you should and shouldn't take risk at. I've always been conservative with that anytime we've been able to do it, but that was a hard thing in the beginning. And one of the reasons we had to, this will be a conversation for later, we had to swap our Amazon company over to another company because once you get above $10,000 a month in Amazon, they want you to be insured and they want you to insure your products. Well, don't go try to insure a product insurance on a school bus part. It's crazy. We went through 7 or 8 insurance companies. As soon as we said school bus, they wouldn't even look at the part, says, no, we won't touch it. And then 1 or 2 that would touch it charged us enormous for which near about put our Amazon business out of business just on the sheer part of trying to pay the insurance that Amazon was asking me. So we ended up having to close it in the Impromech name and opening another because Impromech was tied to school bus parts. It started with a personal need, and then we found others had the same needs. And then as you talk to people, you find out why they would use or why they wouldn't go that way. And then trying to incorporate those things into your designs is interesting. It's much more difficult than just trying to buy something from somebody and resell. So I got to learn a lot of different things, a lot of the hard way. It told trying to understand all that, but in the long run, we were able to overcome a lot of those issues. And you have to be a little risk averse to go into some of these things because there's a lot you don't. If you let fear take control, you'll never move forward. So you have to do it logically, get as much advice as you can, understand where to go. But at some point, you have to pull the trigger. That's what I've seen with younger business people. They're risk averseness is an issue and a struggle.
Yeah, whenever we talk about these things, everybody's going to come across challenges and obstacles, and some of them you mentioned are universal, like cash flow. You got to keep the lights on, and some you just don't know. And when you say pull the trigger, going into that unknown territory, you're not going to know what's going to pop up. You didn't know that the regulations would be so stringent, or that Amazon would clamp down on over $10,000. You just have to overcome. Any advice for unknown challenges, how to address them, how to attack them, or your approach?
You can't get overwhelmed. Break the picture down. And one of the analogies I always use back years ago when I was a little bit younger, I used to love to jog, and I would go running. And for never being trained or anything like that, a lot of times I was pretty quick and I could go long. And one of the things other people would ask me, how you doing that? And I says, well, I don't run the whole way. I'm running to that sign, then to the tree beyond that. I'm going to run to the next sign up there. In life and business, if you look at all the problems that we experience in business day to day, you can become so overwhelmed that you'll be paralyzed. So you have to pick the problems and say, okay, which is causing me the most headache? I'm going to deal with it right now. You can't become overwhelmed. Focus and try to understand and see, and just getting advice. Trying to build a great network of people is extremely helpful in business. There's a couple of big business owners and a lot of small business owners, but nobody does what I do. You look on podcasts, you look on things like that, there's not many people making school bus parts. And so you don't have that big of a people to pull from. So you have to read, you have to learn, you have to try to understand. You're not going to understand all of it, but picking a problem, saying, I'm going to take a certain amount of time to solve it, do the best you can, and then move on. At some point, you can't just let it paralyze you. And that goes with any situation in business. You've got to see the major problems. A lot of times what we feel the most stress over may or may not be that big of an issue. It just may be that issue that's right in your face at that moment. And you just got to learn to push everything aside and say, if that breaks down and goes awry, how bad is it going to be? This would happen, that's bad, but not that bad. It's never going to go to that extreme. So what could actually happen? What could go wrong? Look at it, analyze it, do the best I can. Let's talk. But I got to have a time frame and I move on because there's more problems to deal with. I see a lot of people don't start businesses because they run into a wall and they're standing so close to that wall looks like it covers everywhere and everything. You got to back up a little.
If you've got 100 things competing for attention that you need to focus on, pick the most important one, put all your attention on it, and then move to the next and the next.
That's right. I was a perfectionist at first. I'm still a perfectionist, most people would say, but I've learned you've got to learn where that 80% mark is. If you can get it about 80%, you got to move forward on it. And then you'll try to incrementally increase how good that works, or try to increase the productivity of it, or make it better as you go. For me, if it takes 10 hours to get it to 80%, to probably get it to 82 or 85%, it's probably going to take 20 or 30 hours. And then if I'm going to try to get it to 90%, it may take 3 months. That's too long a time frames. And most people are not even going to know the difference between the 80 and the 85%. Most people probably won't know the difference between the 80 and the 90%. So you have to learn, it says, okay, is this good enough to meet the needs at the moment? And if it is, move forward with it. That's not to say you don't never try to make that product better, but you can't spend the exorbitant amount of time on those issues because then everything else gets neglected. And so trying to find that balance of how to work through your issues and your problems and how to try to get them good enough for the moment so that you can keep things moving, that you can attack something that may be bigger and then come back to that problem and continually increase it. Because that's the thing I tell people is one of the issues you're going to have, you're going to think that problem, I've got to get it to 100%. But in 3 months or 6 months, that problem may be obsolete. It may not, that product that you were pushing, some other product may have come in after that and completely does away with it. And you have to redraw from the drawing board. Be careful. It's not that you don't want great products and great service and not have the least amount of problems, but I think you understand what I'm saying. You don't push it. You can't keep pushing it to perfection because you're never going to get to perfection and you're going to slow the process with everything else.
I would agree with that completely. And just to add to that there is no perfect, but there's always closer to perfect. But the closer you get, the more expensive it becomes in time, challenges, money, and so on. If you've got something in a workable fashion that is going to fit the needs, you can move on. Let's switch gears. We took a detour from the e-commerce stuff, but we did cover how you got started, overcoming challenges, all very important stuff. Many of those specific to what you do. Many of them are universal to what anybody does, no matter what business you're in. Like you just talked about, getting to 80%. That applies to anybody doing anything, which is great. When you made a pivot or adjustment to e-commerce or Amazon specifically, was because you thought maybe you need a higher volume with margins, so you need to sell more to make profit or increase revenue. But why don't you tell us how that worked out?
The issue with any product is you've got to get it in front of the most people to have the most opportunity to sell at scale. Everything's cheaper. When you're small, hand making each one a specific design basket may be a $500 basket every time. It's constantly changing. You don't have enough volume to support it. But anytime you can grow at scale, you can get the cost down to $50. The idea is, how can you scale up? And that was one of the issues we were having. How do we scale up? How do we, we can, even though I was designing and I was doing some of the boxing, I was doing some of the assembling, actually doing parts of manufacturing. We don't do everything. The only way to get costs down is to scale. You've got to have hundreds of orders instead of just 5 and 10s, and you're going to pay for 5 and 10s because of equipment costs, the swap over costs. And so that was my idea of getting into e-commerce, was we reach more people. And I'm not an advertising guy, and I'm the type that you can stick me in a workshop and let me be alone, 14 hours a day, and I would be happy the rest of my life, you know? And so this was always a challenge for me to get out in front of people, to build that. And I said, e-commerce, I don't have to get out in front of people. Amazon is everywhere. That'd be a good way to start. I'll start a website, let Amazon handle my stuff, and I push it through my website to them, and then I can grow my website. When I got into e-commerce, I'd heard horror stories about Amazon and eBay. I'd sold on eBay, just little nitpicky stuff. So I said, let me start with something different than what I'm selling. If I mess up, no harm, no foul. I took about 3.5 months. I did research, tried to find me a program that would kind of jumpstart me to learning some of the stuff in an organized fashion. I spent 3 months, 20 plus hours a week, every week. You know, I was working a full-time job to learn it. I moved forward and I started trying to sell stuff. My first 1 or 2 didn't do nothing, you know, and I was trying to figure out what worked, how to advertise, what people were looking for, how to figure out what people were looking for. Because that's interesting about e-commerce, and especially Amazon in particular, is that you're able to look at what's selling, how much, and read reviews. You can do a comparative study, and Amazon gives you all the data. You can buy software that helps you parse data, but if you want to learn slower, all the data is there in front of you, and you just got to learn how to analyze it. That's what I did, and then part of my stuff started hitting.
When you said you got a program that you spent 20 hours a week, what was that? Are you talking about a software program?
No, I got a training program.
Oh, I see.
Like all the Amazon. I found one that fit my mentality, and I thought I would stick with. I'm good at parsing good and bad information. I've always heard, if you don't know how to sell, well, go make a program and then sell the program to show people how to sell. But it was one of the ideas is, you know, my thought was, how much was I willing to pay to put a ton of information that I didn't have to go search for? I value my time. A lot of people don't. And so they end up doing stuff that would have been cheaper for them to do something to save their time. I looked and said, if I could have all this information, I was willing to pay up to X for that. And then, because I knew I'd done look through there and it was hard to find all the information in one place, I found ones in my budget that I thought would be useful. And I used that. I used it for about 3 months to help me get started. It was a pretty good program, but after the first 3 months, I'm kind of learning on my own and by doing. Once I figured out the back end and tricks, I started building on my own. As we built through that, I started developing spreadsheets and tried different software programs. In the beginning, you don't really know. So you're trying all this different stuff, trying to balance it out and figure out what works with your mentality and the way you work. Software usually forces you into a niche to work the way they want, unless you design it yourself. We spent hundreds of hours developing spreadsheets and different things, trying to do it. Once you figure it out and find software that fits you, then that's the time to do that. That's how my Amazon started, and it actually took off in the direction I didn't expect. And I actually don't even sell much of my school bus parts on Amazon, but we found Amazon hit a bunch of people and they would find my website and call me personally. So the bigger wholesalers, the bigger suppliers. So I'd end up, for my school bus business, it did nothing but kind of advertise, because people will be looking, and because of the way Amazon ranks all your stuff, they would pull up Bluebird's coolant tank, and I would rank high because I had Bluebird coolant tanks on Amazon. On the first page of Google, that stuff would pop up. I would get phone calls, and that's
and I'll
how
add in there real quick, Robert. When you talk about Amazon, we talk about revenue being profitable, making money, but also building brand or enterprise value. You're getting exposure and people are seeing your name, your logo, because of the reach of that platform. Go ahead and continue.
That's exactly what it does. Get you out in front of everybody. We actually, because Amazon it's a good cash flow resource for us. And it's not, the products we sell now on Amazon are not the big flashy stuff. This was interesting to people. When I was doing Amazon, we assembled a lot of our products because I had a warehouse. I had some girls that worked for me that would do assembly of stuff. So what we would do is we would order in our parts. One of the ways I found that I could make money on Amazon is, and this is kind of good to know for business, but I'll share this, is that I find 2 or 3 parts or pieces or items that go together, because basically I'd read a bunch of reviews and people saying, hey, this is a great item. I compared it with frequently bought on Amazon together. If you're going to put this in, you usually need this to go with it. Or if you're going to replace this, usually this needs to be replaced with it. I would do the combos and kitting where we put it together. Most people don't know on Prime, we're getting free shipping. It's all figured in on the back end. I couldn't compete with that individual item, but I could combine two. And because on the savings on shipping, the shipping cost would become the same as one shipment. My profit margin was the shipment cost because I was paying more for the products than the people that were selling the majority of them, because I couldn't buy them in bulk like they did. You have to find ways to get in the market because you can't compete with somebody that can beat you on volume. It's extremely hard to compete.
The kit had a lower price, but a higher margin because of shipping.
If you had 2 items on Amazon, each $10 for a $20 total, each one pays Amazon fees. They probably had $3.5, $4 in commission, and shipment on FBA, depending on the side of the item, could be slightly more, slightly less. When you combine them, you had $7 in shipment costs because you bought them separately. But that $7 is where I would find my profit, because I would take the 2 items, I'd have to pay slightly more, I would combine them, but I was still shipping them with an Amazon fee of about $4.50. So I can make $2 or $3 more on profit. That's how I started. As you build volume, you can increase margins. It worked to help me grow. Once you hit something nobody has and it takes off, you can get your inputs down by being able to buy. The problem on those platforms is funny. One of the first things I did on Amazon, I found these leveling feet I was selling. Everybody says they're all the same color. I made a kit, put them together. Black goes with any kind of furniture. Why don't we just do a black one? You can go today and search leveling feet under Amazon, and probably 60% of them are black. That's what people need to understand. If you find something novel and you find something new, you better be looking for the next one, because people are good at imitating.
When you started, you were the only one selling that black leveling feet, and now there's 60 because you were doing well. People can see the metrics. This guy over here, he's killing it. Let's take some of his market share.
It's finding what people are interested in, because fads change. What's interesting, I can see a different color with modern furniture would work well, but nobody's put the different colors up there yet. And so, and that's in businesses, I always say it like this: you watch what everybody else is doing, then run the other way. If you understand the market well and you understand the amount of how big that market is. If it's huge, that's the fastest way to get into the market and you can get going on it. But if these are smaller markets and you try to just imitate, you're taking a set market and you're splitting it. If the market is millions of people, then it can probably be split thousands of times and everybody can make a little bit. But if it's a smaller market, then you're just splitting the market for everybody, and so
too late to the game. Probably.
Right. You want to be on the leading edge, not the trailing edge. The problem with being on the leading edge is most of the time you'll never know you get there until it actually happens. You're going to have to try different things. You're going to have little different feelers out trying to hit those little leading edges of the market. You get better at it if you constantly try to do that. And I think that's what some people just don't do. They try to follow what everybody else is doing. So you never learn what that leading edge looks like.
And when you do hit that leading edge, you become a target. So you have to look for the next one or pivot or adjust or do something to stay ahead.
Probably one of the greatest books when I first started out in business, Blue Ocean Strategy, was, a great book to help you learn and understand about competition and how competition works. That blue ocean, not the red ocean, which is a bloody ocean, but there's a lot of competition inside of it. And that blue ocean is no competition. And that's the things that you're looking for.
Yeah, no sharks. All right, well, hey, as we move through that, you did touch on a lot of technology stuff briefly, and Focal's a technology company. If you could share any software or solutions to challenges that were helpful, did you find any one or two or three softwares that really helped you run your business?
I've went through several different softwares and technologies, and because of the way I think it's hard to find those, I tried Amazon stuff, Jungle Scout, Helium, and
Helium 10.
I've tried several. I believe there's all great softwares. It's trying to figure out what fits your market and what fits your way of thinking, because softwares generally is a learning curve, and something that kind of fits your style is going to be it's going to be the easiest learning curve. I tell people I'm not against any of them. I've had some that worked better for me and some that didn't work a little better. They all have their pros and cons. It's trying to find those that save you the time, and for the amount of time that they're saving you, that it costs, the cost is justified through the time savings. And that's what software and technology ought to be. It ought to be a time savings. So there's a number of them out there. We had used QuickBooks, we used Microsoft Business Central, we had used Monday.com for task management. We're currently using Odoo for inventory and accounting. Basically that and spreadsheets. We've been testing newer versions of Amazon software. I've got a new manager that's doing that for me, and I'm kind of letting him fill out what works for him. And so, but they're great. There's great softwares out there. I just don't have one that I fully push. I don't veer anybody away from them. I try it, test it, and see, because softwares always have limitations, especially bigger software companies. They're not going to help fix my little problems.
They're not going to make their software do it your way. You're going to use the software
their way. If you find one of those big softwares and it's cheap and it works great for you, great. But a lot of times you've got to figure out what works for you. And there are companies that work with it, and we found, and we've done some tweaking on some softwares to try to get them exactly the way we want them. And that's great. But I always tell everybody that's something that comes later. You need to make sure you've got great products and you're funneling some money in to make sure you can keep up with that. And anytime those can save time, invest in those. Don't be scared of any kind of software. How's it implemented? How does it work? How is it supported? I try to keep it minimalistic. Most of the people that are in my small town are technologically challenged for a lot of part. And so trying to get people to understand and work with different softwares, just the training side of it.
Yeah, what you mentioned, which is important, is how much time it can save. If you value your time, there's the saying, time is money. If software can save you 10, 20 hours a week, that's a lot. Spreadsheets in e-commerce can be very time consuming. If you can eliminate that, you get time back for your life or to enhance other parts of your business.
It's all about time. We only have 24 hours a day, and it's how we manage those 24 hours. You can have a lot of time doing work, or less time doing work, or get more work accomplished. Everybody's different. To give an example, and we no longer use it, so it's not an endorsement, but when I was at the peak on the Amazon stuff, we're currently rebuilding our Amazon account. Long story short of it, when I was at the peak of it, I was managing $30 to $40,000 a month in sales. We were assembling them at our warehouse, but I basically have built out some spreadsheets inside of Monday.com, and I'd organized it and automated it in such a way that I would manage 50 plus products on Amazon for $40,000 a month. I set aside from 7 to 9 every Saturday. That's the only time I spend on Amazon. I do it in 2 hours. And I managed that. It took me hundreds of hours to get that figured out. But once I got that figured out, it was, okay, I need this. Let me put these numbers in. And when I was managing it, I would look at every listing. I knew the previous week had 100 reviews, so we had 102. I would look at the reviews. For all my listings, I always read every review. I looked at the page once a week. I looked at all the keywords once a week, and I had it set up where I could do that in 2 hours. When I hit the button, I had it set up that our stock needed to be 150 units in Amazon, and it would take 2 weeks to get it in. We had 50 units in Amazon. When I hit the key that we only have 50 units, it automated, sent my warehouse girl, hey, we need to make 100 units and they need to be shipped by this date. She would do it and send me an email back that it was done. And so I get to monitor all that through that. And that was, instead of spending 10, 15, 20 hours a week, I worked it down to 2 really focused hours. That's what software can save you.
Perfect example of getting a software, flexing it to your needs, creating a system that works, and maximizing time or minimizing time needed to accomplish what needed to be done. Great. Okay, why don't we move a little? We covered a lot. We talked about past and present. Let's talk about the future. The e-commerce market is moving from 6 trillion in online sales to 8 trillion in the next year and a half to 2 years. Massive increase. Amazon and other marketplaces, there are hundreds, and direct online purchasing as well. What are your plans for the future? Your advice for people moving toward the future in e-commerce?
E-commerce is not going to go away. It's only going to get bigger. An example, in my own hometown, my wife owns some coffee shops. Drive-through windows are about 80% of their business. A lot of people are on the go. They're busy, and small menial tasks don't take priority. They're going to do it the easiest and sometimes not even the cheapest way they can do it. It saves them time and is easiest for them, convenience. Understanding that and trying to understand how to capitalize on that in a market that is constantly changing. The downside to everything moving like that, you're competing with companies that you have huge scale, and the cost of acquisition of a sale, they may be selling $1 product for $20, but they have a $5, $7, $10 cost of acquisition. Facebook ads, Instagram, TikTok, Google ads, all that costs money. It's hard to compete with those. So moving forward, how do you create a great experience? How do you create some kind of niche? Because you can have a weird niche in the market that there's nobody in your hometown, or even if you live in a big city, you don't even know anybody that does it. But the world is big enough that you may have a market for it. And so trying to figure out, how do you connect with the audience? And I think it constantly moves around. You've seen videos connect well. Sometimes for certain products, sometimes the simplest, the bluntest, the straightforwardest, here's toilet paper, this is what it is, we're selling it. And sometimes that's all people want. But understanding that market and understanding what people are looking for. There's no reason, which I'm sure, the Charmin commercials, they spend a ton of time and effort on that. But there's certain markets that you can get in that you don't have to advertise much. And then there's certain markets that it's just gone. How do you get it in front of people? How do you find the clientele? Podcasting is coming up. That helps reach people that are looking at the same interest you are. How do you connect with online networking? How do you use LinkedIn, social media? Is that a good source for your product? We're trying to maximize those. We've talked a lot about Amazon. I've been on Walmart, eBay. We have our own, hopefully after the first of this year, rebuilding our website. How do we connect? My market is school bus shops, school bus people. The average person could care less. How do I reach out to those people when a lot of those, one of the problems I found early on, and people think, is school buses are governmental agencies, most of the places that work on, and so they're behind the curve on everything. There is tons of schools in my state, probably over half, don't shop online. They use their local vendors for everything that they need, because the bureaucracy of trying to get through and doing POs and stuff. You need to understand your market and where you need to reach your market at, because all of that's changing for me, simply because, but they're 10 years behind the curve. How do I reach those customers better? How do I get that face-to-face? Some people are missing more face-to-face conversations. Some people are missing more being able to talk to somebody that actually knows and understands the product. So how do we navigate that realm of, it's so much easier to hire somebody in India that we're going to pay $5 an hour to answer troubleshooting calls because it's more profitable. Is that best for your markets? Trying to understand the e-commerce market now, the new players, certain things that'll do well on eBay that won't do well on Amazon. There's certain things that won't do well on either one of them, but do well on Walmart. Walmart's spending tons of money to become an e-commerce giant. Who's coming up? Are you learning new technologies to get into different platforms? How do you make your own website? How do you leverage social media to bring it? Because there's a lot of these techniques that can be high impact, low cost, because anything you put into the cost side of the equation, if you put something $100 into the cost side of the equation, it's more like $150 of actual cost because you need to make that profit back. It's mind-blowing and dizzying the speed of technology changes. Trying to keep up and be on a leading edge feels almost impossible.
It's hard to know what to do, how to do it. A lot of it's trial and error, but find the marketplace that works for you and find how to get in front of the people that need what you have.
Find that one first, whatever you think will be the most profitable, then expanding through it, because there are sometimes certain, like most people know, if you're going to have something really creative and it's going to be one-off, Etsy's the place, but dip your toe in Amazon, eBay, and Walmart, your own website and local farmers market. You find that one that's going to be your main one, then you try to pull revenue from those other streams too. It'll operate slightly different, but a lot of things are transferable.
Yeah. If you compare Amazon and Walmart, if you've got a good model on Amazon, it's probably going to work on Walmart. Amazon did. Right. If you look at those two businesses, those marketplaces, they're kind of the same, but they're flipped in how they evolved. One was an online marketplace and then became a distribution company. One was a distribution company that now wants to become an online marketplace. They want to be as big as Amazon.
You have to embrace change and always be moving forward. I'm old enough to remember Sears and Roebuck catalogs. Nobody thought Sears and Roebuck was going away, and then a lot of your younger generation have never heard of it anymore. I remember.
And you could buy a home out of a catalog. A physical catalog.
That's right. And that's what people didn't understand. They were ahead of their time, but because they didn't evolve and keep moving forward.
I only looked at the motorcycles because I was a kid when Sears was around. That was a long time ago, but you're right. That was the biggest marketplace in the world. And everybody thought this will never change. And it sure did.
You have to be careful with putting all your eggs in one basket, because a lot of people think that. I don't think Amazon's going away anytime soon, but who knows what the next player is? Who knows what can change in the world?
Or a regulation or a fee or something that changes your whole business model because you can't make a penny on a sale.
That's right. And that was interesting to me in business. I never got taught what profit should you be making. Their answer would be as much as you possibly can. They were not being greedy. They were saying profit's going to be harder to come by than you think. To have a great product at a great price, if it's good and profitable, take that profit, because it's not going to stay there long. It's going to come down because you're going to have competition.
You mentioned earlier the company that has a product that costs them $1 that they sell for $20. Well, if that's all the context you have, you would think that my God, that would be the most profitable company in the world. But no, there's a lot of costs involved in just getting the client to the product, and then when the sale happens. And that's where, when you mention profitability, that's a big part of what we do too, is giving our clients visibility to all those fees so they know if they're profitable. So they know they're not just moving a product for fun. You've got to make money, or eventually the hobby's done.
Well, then you bring up a good point there. That is probably one of the biggest things in business, understanding your metrics and having the ability to see that. One of the most profitable parts of software that you'll have is because you need to be able to see exactly what's going on. Looking at balance sheets and profit and loss statements, and it's like, oh, this is a little bit confusing, but it breaks down its analytics to what you're doing and where the money's going or where the money's coming in. If you're flying by the seat of your pants because you don't know your numbers, keeping up with those numbers and making sure you have good data, you're saying, okay, we're not profitable this month. What was going on? Well, were we spending too much over here? Well, I think we were. You don't need to think, you need to know. Different softwares helping you understand. Case in point, one of my new managers was working with our Amazon account. I gave him a lot of freedom. I was looking at the analytics for the month before. Did you check the advertising costs last month? And he lowered his head and said, yeah, a little excessive. I said, we went negative $200 in the hole last month. We can't do that. It can fly away quickly if you're not paying attention to where that's going, and then being able to dig down into those analytics and say, why did it not work this month? We spent more money on advertising and sales went down that month. What happened? Was it the month, the product?
At least you know where to start digging.
Right. And that's where the software comes in at, is really being able to help that.
Yeah.
Kind of thing like that.
Yeah, it's like a living organism. You've got to check the pulse, blood pressure, and
right.
All that. Fascinating conversation. As we wrap up, if anybody wants to get in touch or see what you're doing, let our listeners know how to do that.
Mainly, you look at Impromech.com. That is our website, and I can be emailed through there or on LinkedIn. We don't do a lot of social media marketing at the moment because our clientele is usually not the social media types. That's something we'll probably start more in the future. Reach out to me from our info at Impromech.com or rfordham@Impromech.com, and be glad to help or talk with anybody.
You might get some questions after this good conversation. We'll wrap it up with that. Thank you, Robert, for joining us, and thanks to everyone for listening. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Focal Insights Podcast. If you like this episode, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you can be alerted of new episodes. See you next time.